All right, thank you for that. Yes, I am with the Division of Water Resources, and I'll be talking about our water status and sort of the outlook for the summer. I do work for the Division of Water Resources, and our mission here is to plan, conserve, develop, and protect Utah's water resources. So we'll start off by looking at the US Drought Monitor map for Utah. And that map in the center that has more white on it is the current map. And that's a huge improvement from the map on the right there that is a year ago. The yellow that you see on the current map is a category of abnormally dry. And so that isn't actually a drought category. It's an area that we're sort of keeping an eye on. It could be coming into drought. It could be just coming out of drought. It's just an area that we're watching in respect to drought, but it's not a drought category in and of itself. The lighter orange there along the border with Colorado, that is a moderate drought category. And so less than 4% of the state is currently in drought. And a year ago, we had 96% of the state in drought. And so, that amazing record snowpack that we had last year did make a huge difference. And and talking about resiliency, it was able to bounce back a lot faster than we ever suspected that it would. We thought it would take several years to get to this point. So that was great news to have that year last year that was just amazing and made a big difference to our water supplies. When we're talking about water, we always start with snow water equivalent in Utah because almost 95% of our water supply does come from snowpack in Utah.
From my talk.
And so we have this black line here is the current year, the snowpack for this year. And then the green line is the median or what's kind of typical, what we'd see. And then that rainbow of that you see on there is the last 30 years. All the last 30 years will fit somewhere in that rainbow. So snow water equivalent is just how much water would be in the snowpack if it melted. And right now, statewide, this is a statewide average, and so it gives us a good idea. We have 13 inches of water in the snowpack. We usually like to hit that little green X there that's 16 inches at the peak around the 1st of April. And if we can hit that, then it's sort of a typical year. We haven't really seen a typical year for several years. We've either been in drought or last year we had that record year. But that is kind of like what we would like to see there. And this is, as I said, a statewide average. So looking at a map, you can see more of it broken down into basin, which is more indicative probably of your area, how your area is doing and how your water supply is locally. All the basins in the state are currently over 100% of what's typical for this time of year. And looking at that smaller map there, I know you can't see the colors, but you can't see the numbers, but the colors, the warmer colors are the lower numbers. So the red is the 30 to 50%, the orange is 50 to 70%, then it goes to yellow, green is around 100%, and then blues are wetter colors. And so looking at that map on January 1st, there was a lot of, areas that we were a little concerned about, especially down in southern Utah. We were very concerned where they were at, 33% in that area. And then we had a great January where the entire state received more precipitation than is normal for January. And we were able to really turn things around this year to where now we're doing pretty well with all these storms that we've had in January and then into February. So big difference there. And we're not terribly concerned about the water supply for this year, but we do have, it's 42 days, I think, until we would normally hit our peak. So we want these storms to just keep coming. That's, what we like is nice, consistent storms to bring us our water for the summer. Now that map that I just showed is available on NRCS's website, both of the charts that I just showed. And the link to that is in the conference agenda. So you can go on there and it will get you to this map right here, which you'll notice has some dots on it. And these dots are the stations that they take the measurements at. And so you can go in and see where that station is in relation to where you're at, because it could be at a higher elevation, it could be really close to you, it could be, you can see whether that's representative of where you're at. And you can also see if you click on that little testing station there, you can see the snowpack, you can see precipitation, you can see soil moisture, and you can see a different map with different stations that will show stream flow. They don't have stream flow at the same locations as the other, but all that information is available, and it gives you a detail just for that station. So again, if you're pretty close to those stations, and sometimes, if they're close to you but at a higher elevation, you might find that they're consistently, say, 20% higher in precipitation than you are because they're at a higher elevation or something. So just kind of keep an eye on that, and over time, and then you'll learn if that station, how it relates to your property and how your water is on your site versus this station. So soil moisture, I mentioned, was one of the things that is available through NRCS, and our soil moisture right now is doing pretty well. You are seeing a little bit of the yellows coming in for those dry areas along the eastern side of the state, but still not too worrisome, 73%. And I will note that that 73% is actually the percent of what's typical for this time of year. So it's not, you see kind of the Tooele area there is at 187%. Well, that's related to what is normal for Tooele this time of year. It's not oversaturated by 87%, I guess. You don't have water leaking out. That's not what it is. It can be a little confusing. But mostly we do have favorable conditions for the spring runoff. If we have the wetter soils, then more of the snowpack will get down into the streams, into the reservoirs, and be available for our summer water supply. If the soil is too dry, then they just soak all that water up before it can make it where we want it to go. And again, you can show the particular stations and see what the soil moisture is at the different locations. This particular chart, I did a 20-inch depth, and they also have 8-inch depth, and that might be useful for you for looking at, your root depth and things. How wet is the soil down at that, at an 8-inch depth? Some stations do have a 40-inch depth, but there aren't quite as many stations that have that 40-inch depth available, but almost all of them have the 8-inch depth. So if that's useful for your crops, then that is available. And again, you just go into that interactive map that's on the link and click on one of those sites that's closest to you, and it'll show you that soil moisture. So we have our snowpack, and we have our soil moisture, and that will translate into stream flow. USGS measures stream flow, and they have some real-time data. This website that is linked on the conference agenda is the real-time data. In our office, we actually use more of a 5-day average, or because we're looking at total volume, and stream flow can be pretty volatile depending on precipitation and snowmelt and temperatures, and it goes up and down quite a bit. So for our office, we prefer the average, but if you're in an area that maybe closer to where you are concerned about flooding, you probably want the real-time data. And you'll see some circles here kind of up in the Uintas and some other areas that are gray with a red circle around them. Those are they're not reporting at this time. you can actually click on them and see a number. They will have a flow there, but they're not verifying the data. It's basically ice. At this point, at this time of year, they just have some ice. There may be ice chunks. The stream may be iced over and flow underneath, and it affects their gauges. So they don't report the real-time data necessarily, but you can still click on that and see the real-time data. And if you feel comfortable, you can decide if that data looks accurate or if that data doesn't seem right, but that isn't something that they guarantee because their gauges are affected by ice at this time of year at some of those locations. Again, any one of these sites, you just click on it, you can get information over the last several days, you can get averages over the last few days, and get more information on those. And again, the colors on this are the same, where the reds are more concerning, drier, but we do have a lot of the greens, which are just in that normal range. And to see, they're just flowing pretty normally. And then we even have some that are a little bit above normal up in the northern part of the state. And then the darker blue are much above normal. So good news on those, on the stream flow. It's just nice to have a normal year. We had several years of drought, and then last year we really had a year that turned things around, and to be able to say, things are just looking pretty normal, pretty typical. That's not something I've had for several years, so I'm enjoying that. Our reservoir levels, that's the next step in here is the reservoir levels. We are still benefiting from that record snowpack last year. Statewide, our reservoirs are about 82% full, and that is quite a bit higher than what they would typically be this time of year. We would only see about 59% full typically this time of year. And we do have 6 reservoirs that are below 60% full, but reservoirs are managed very, very differently depending on their purpose. Some reservoirs are used more for irrigation and are typically filled each year and then almost emptied each year if they're used for irrigation. And so these lower reservoirs, that may be just their typical pattern of how they fill and are used. And then the culinary reservoirs are usually more multi-year, where they will store water for several years at a time. Yuba did have some spillway work done last year. Unfortunately, they weren't able to take advantage of that record snowpack quite as much and fill the reservoir because they needed to keep the level down to do the work that they were trying to do. I'm fairly certain that work is completed now, and they are going to be able to fill a little bit more this coming summer. But so that's why that particular reservoir is a little bit lower. Groundwater. Some of you may have your groundwater as your water source. And so I put this on here in case it's useful to you. Groundwater is the last thing that is affected by drought, and it is the last thing to recover from drought. This color scheme is a little bit different than the others that we've seen, where the dark brown is the drier conditions, and then the tan is low, white is normal, and then the blues are wetter. And we are seeing a lot of the darker brown on this map, unfortunately. We have, used our groundwater sources, and then also we had prolonged years of drought leading up to our record snowpack last year. And so we've had some recovery in the shallower groundwater and, shallower aquifers, but not the deeper aquifers are just going to take time. Those do take a lot of time to recharge and refill. For each of these, you can find out when that measurement was taken. They call these real-time data, but the groundwater isn't measured as frequently as surface water. And so you want to look at these and make sure you understand when the last reading was taken to know how current that level is. But if, again, you can get more information on any of these sites as to when the last measurement was taken, and you can see if it's trending upward or trending downward. Most of you, if you have wells, you probably have a pretty good idea of how your well is doing, because if you're pumping that, that's something that's you're aware of what that water level is. But this is just another resource to go if you want to see how other wells in your area are doing and things. Temperature, that was the big thing this past winter that was a little bit different, was we have had very warm temperatures. So the chart on the left-hand side is the average temperature. So, the average for the 24-hour period for the last 3 months. And the whole state was warmer than is normal for Utah. Where we had quite a bit warmer along the northeastern part of the state. And then also the minimum temperature was quite a bit warmer as well. And that is the map on the right-hand side. And so the minimum temperature is telling us, that we're, like at my house, for example, we have had a lot more rain than we've had snow. And that's a little bit unusual for us. And so, we're seeing more of maybe the lower elevation snow is melting, a little bit, maybe more rain falling than snow this year because of these warmer temperatures. And, last year we had all those atmospheric rivers that came in and we had a lot of snow. And this year we're having atmospheric rivers, and some locations are getting snow and some locations are getting rain because of these warmer temperatures. So, the temperature leads to evaporative demand, and this is a map of evaporative demand drought index. It is a tool that's a sort of an early warning for drought conditions, and it's available, for the last year, for the last 6 months, for the last 3 months. I thought that 2-week would be more applicable to this group to see kind of what's happening. This map is updated daily, actually. So, you can go in each day and see how much, and this is basically how thirsty the air is for water. So go in there and look and see, and you can say, hey, a lot of water is actually getting sucked down my plants. And so that may affect how much water you need to put on your crops to get a good, effective, produce a lot out of your plants and your crops. This is part of the reason that we encourage people to, move to those drip and move to other watering that's a little bit closer to the ground, so that we don't lose as much water in the air on these times. Summer, we just don't usually winter, we don't usually have a high evaporation rate. But then when we move into summer, you will see more of the reds and the oranges and just a higher evaporation coming into areas on the dry, hot times, because the water, more water is being lost to the air, unfortunately. As an outlook, we have, so this is produced by the National Weather Service then for the next 3 months. And I won't spend a lot of time on this because there aren't really a lot of strong indicators right now. The seasonal precipitation outlook, we just kind of have equal chances of wet or dry. And the seasonal temperature outlook, if you cut the state in half diagonally, the northwestern part is leaning a little bit towards warmer, but it's not really a strong indicator. So I guess there's not a lot we can predict right now about the next 3 months. We'll just have to kind of take it a little bit at a time, I guess, and take it as it comes. If you are concerned about how much volume might be coming down stream for flooding issues, or if you have water rights that you're using to irrigate and they're tied to a certain stream flow, you can go to Colorado River Basin Forecast Center, and that link is on the conference agenda as well. And they will they have forecasts starting at the 1st of January, and the accuracy of those forecasts obviously just gets more and more accurate the further along we get in the season, because there's so much unpredictability at the 1st of December of how much more precipitation and storms we're going to get throughout the year. Here is their forecast for the year, and they are for specific points on certain rivers and streams. And they are not quite, most streams aren't quite at 100% of typical, of normal for forecast, but we are seeing a lot that are in the 70 to 90% range, which is, again, after those years of drought that we had, 70 to 90% doesn't seem that bad, and our reservoirs are quite high. And then a lot of that are in the yellow, 90 to 100% as well. So, a little bit low, but not in the alarmingly low too much. But there are some that are in that 50 to 70% in particular streams. So if you are concerned about the stream related to your water right, or as we get into spring runoff, they will also on this map have a 3-day forecast that will indicate if they think that there are going to be flooding conditions on this river at each of these locations, and that may be helpful as well. We don't typically have flooding downstream from our reservoirs, because that is part of the purpose of the reservoirs, is to gather that water and then release it at a safe volume downstream. So even though our reservoirs are a little bit higher, we aren't concerned too much about flooding downstream from them. But there are other locations that don't have a reservoir, or maybe upstream from the reservoir, and those are the areas that you may check this map to see if there are concerns about flooding. If you found this information useful, we do have a monthly webinar that shares most of the same data, and you have an opportunity to ask questions and it's presented by people, by NRCS, by USGS, not by myself. And so they are the ones that collect the data and analyze it, and you can ask them questions. And one of the purposes of the webinar is to look at the current U.S. drought monitor map and see if it accurately reflects conditions in Utah. So, if you see somewhere in the U.S. drought monitor map you don't think is accurate, you can submit that observation that, maybe the map needs to be looked at and adjusted here or where you're at. And if you want to sign up for those webinars, my contact information is at the end, or you can just email drought@utah.gov. And the last thing is, if you are taking measurements on your site at your location of precipitation, rain and snow, or if you want to, there is a network of volunteers that records sites. It's COCORA's Collaborative Community Rain, Hail, and Snow Network. And you can report that online or on your, on your phone or your computer or whatever, report every day how things are going, where you're at. And it's very helpful to us because the stations that are set up by NRCS are very good. They have a lot of quality control. They have a lot of analysis and things that they do, but that takes quite a bit of manpower. So they are actually a little bit expensive to maintain, because they do have so much quality control and upkeep and things with them, and they're typically at higher elevation locations. And so to have these people reporting precipitation at their location is very helpful to us, especially those summer storms that can hit a spot and miss somewhere right across the valley, or, it gives us a better idea of how widespread these storms are and what people are seeing at different locations. So if you're interested in that, John Mayer up at USU is actually the one who heads that for the state of Utah. And that's all I have. So thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, just email me. If something comes up later, I'll be happy to answer questions if there's time now.
We do have a couple of minutes, and there are some interesting questions there in the Q&A for you. I'll just tell you one while you're pulling that up. It said, would how would the warmer temperatures and more rain based precip that we have this year affect snowpack in comparison to years with more snow-based precip?
That is a very good question. So it depends a little bit on where it is in the state and the relationship to the reservoirs. When we have precipitation that's a lower elevation than the collection systems, the reservoirs, that's when we run into a little more of a problem. And also the summer storms that we get that are where they're very flashy, they get a lot of debris, and they can get a lot of they're just muddy and they're very hard to deal with. When we get more of the winter rains, they are cleaner and we're able to store them a little bit better.
There's a question too, how often are our normal values updated, or are they?
They are. In fact, NRCS last year, our peak snow water equivalent was 15.8 inches, and now it's 16 after last year. So it changed in.
And I know that, our even our frost zones, our hardiness zones have changed recently. So, I mean, temperature things there have also been adjusted recently. Do you know how much of Utah's water comes from pumping groundwater?
I don't have that number offhand.
That would be an interesting one. I have to look that one up too myself.
Yeah.
Um, do the normal ranges, when we talk about our reservoir capacities, do those levels assume that they can hold a sufficient amount of water to support needs, or is it just based on the size of the reservoir?
It is based on the size of the reservoir.
Not necessarily what the need that it contributes to. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they do vary. As I said, like Jordanelle is one of our larger reservoirs that holds 5 or 6 years worth of water, and then other reservoirs are maybe 2 years capacity of water. So they do vary quite a bit.